So, I went dormant for a while on YouTube, and here I am, back again. This time I'm actually going to commit to this because I love YouTube. I grew up on YouTube, and my hope is to share my love for movies, certainly, and I also hope to share some things that are potentially helpful, potentially not. I'm not much of an advice person. I'm not an advice giver. Everyone's experience in life, I've found, is so radically different that I don't know if any advice is good advice, so to speak. But what I can offer is some experiences, some thoughts, and what I want to talk about today is one of my favorite films, one of my favorite directors, a film that absolutely changed my life. And I want to talk about The Aviator, directed by Martin Scorsese, starring Leonardo DiCaprio, because it did change my life. And I was already in love with movies when I watched it. I was already in love with Scorsese as a director. He is one of my favorite directors. I think he's one of the greatest directors of all time. That's a pretty widely held opinion. And in this film, he was working with a really young Leonardo DiCaprio. I mean, I think Leo DiCaprio was like 25 at the time. And this was early in DiCaprio's career. So it was a very bold choice, first of all, because it's an unusual story. The story of Howard Hughes is very unusual. He was an eccentric man. And I think the eccentricity point of the character is muddied by the fact that when we look back, we realize, or not we, with historical context, it's become clear that Howard Hughes had very serious obsessive-compulsive disorder. I personally learned that I had obsessive-compulsive disorder from The Aviator, if you can believe it. I had been having some struggles with mental health at the time that I saw The Aviator, and I had never seen it before. It was one of the Scorsese films I hadn't seen, and I threw it on, watched it, and felt... To say I felt like moved by it does feel like an understatement. I think I was like really stirred by it. I think I had some sort of almost like pseudo spiritual experience watching it. And the aspect of the Howard Hughes character, as played brilliantly by Leonardo DiCaprio, the aspect of that character that stuck with me the most was his suffering. It's very clear in the film, and Scorsese does such a great job. John Logan wrote the screenplay. The screenplay's fantastic. John Logan's a great writer as well. The film makes it very clear that Howard Hughes is really suffering. That is he's having what he thinks of as sort of spells of madness. There's a scene where that is essentially how he describes it to Cate Blanchett. He sort of has this fear that he's losing his mind, and with some historical context, we can look back and essentially say Howard Hughes had undiagnosed, pretty extreme obsessive compulsive disorder. So I watched this film, I finished it, and it just was living with me in the days following me watching it. And I watched it alone, like in my living room. And I was so taken by the film that I just started looking into Leonardo DiCaprio's process of working on that character, which is actually a pretty well documented thing. There were some featurettes that came out. I probably, when they released the film on digital, on DVD rather, there was a featurette that came out where, you know, Leonardo DiCaprio is talking about his process, and he says, in the featurette, he says, oh, well, Howard Hughes, you know, had obsessive compulsive disorder. And I go, what's obsessive compulsive disorder? Like, I knew, I had heard people say, oh, I have OCD, this, and, you know, I have OCD because I'm really neat and stuff like that. That is a, the way most people think about obsessive compulsive disorder is not what obsessive compulsive disorder is. This film, I would say in large part because of Leonardo DiCaprio and probably the script, and Scorsese's directing, the film captures the truth about obsessive compulsive disorder so painstakingly that I was watching the film and I was like, whatever that man, whatever Howard Hughes had, I have. And that hunch was essentially confirmed by watching this featurette wherein Leonardo DiCaprio is saying how he studied folks who had patients who had severe obsessive compulsive disorder to play Howard Hughes, and how he spent, you know, extended periods of time with a number of people who really suffer with obsessive compulsive disorder. There are many people who do, and I had just started therapy at the time that I saw the film, and I went into the therapist I was seeing at the time, who is no longer my therapist. I had to get a different therapist, because I went in and said, hey, listen, I know you've been treating me for generalized anxiety. I watched this movie, and I think I have obsessive compulsive disorder. I think that's what's going on. And she was a complete, consummate professional and said, well, if that's what you have, you need to see a specialist. And I, via the search, looking for an OCD specialist, a therapist who specializes in OCD, I found my current therapist. But I tell that story because it underscores to me part of why films are so important. I really think this art form, when it's doing its job, it is important. And I don't say important in the with any amount of pretense, because I think, you know, really silly movies are important. You know, I think like a movie like Caddyshack is important because it makes you gutturally laugh. I think laughter is important. I think entertainment is important. This is just one example wherein my life was literally changed. This was about 5 years ago. My life was literally changed by this film. By the dedication of Leonardo DiCaprio, his commitment to portraying this disorder so vividly, and portraying this man, Howard Hughes, so vividly, and Scorsese's, you know, painstaking commitment to telling a story precisely and compellingly, John Logan's commitment, all the other filmmakers involved, production designers, DP, everyone involved in this film through what I would say is a valiant effort. It's a brilliant movie. They changed my life. In the intervening 5 years since I saw The Aviator, I have done intensive therapy, and I am proud to say today that OCD does not rule my life anymore, and it did for a long time. And to me, that is such a beautiful thing. And it reminds me, when I tell this story, it reminds me of why I love filmmaking so much. Because I do think when filmmakers, and I use the term filmmakers broadly, actors, directors, writers, producers, etc. When filmmakers unite under a vision, a coherent, cohesive vision, when they unite kind of under the spell of probably passion, right, to tell a story, it really can have a cultural and have a human impact. It can have an impact on other people. Whether it's a really silly movie or it's a really sort of erudite, serious movie. To me, the full spectrum of films can have a deep impact on people. And I wanted to get on here and tell that story. And I just want to also say thank you for listening to the story. Please like and subscribe or comment. I engage with most comments, as long as there's some substance and nothing too overly negative about them. I do respond and engage with most comments. But if you were interested in this story, if you appreciated my perspective here, let me know. And if you have thoughts or questions or anything along those lines, let me know. And thank you so much for watching.